Welcome to the Partist channel. Today we explain Prophets Kings 1 chapter 3 in a clear and simple way, step by step. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here with us today as we unpack one of the most famous, foundational, and quite frankly, dramatic chapters in the entire Hebrew Tanakh. We're going to look really closely at the plain meaning of the text, the Peshat, to understand exactly what's happening, who is involved, and why it matters. And we're going to do all of this without getting lost in complicated symbols or skipping over any of those really important little details. It is an amazing story, so let's just get right into it.
So, here's our quick roadmap for the chapter. We'll start with the context of Solomon's early reign, move into his incredible dream at Gibeon, break down the impossible dispute between the two mothers, witness his famous judgment, clarify a few key ideas, and wrap it all up with some practical life lessons we can take away.
Section 1. Context and Early Reign. Let's set the stage.
Right off the bat in verse 1, the chapter grounds us in the gritty political reality of Solomon's newly established throne. We learn that Solomon secures his borders by making an alliance and marrying the daughter of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, bringing her right into the city of David. Now you have to remember, in the ancient world, marrying a foreign princess wasn't usually some big romance. It was a highly standard, very practical way to forge a peace treaty and secure a kingdom. Egypt was a massive, intimidating superpower at the time, so this alliance shows Solomon solidifying his nation politically right out of the gate. The text also gives us a crucial detail. He brought her into the city of David until he had finished building his own house, and the house of the Lord, which of course is the temple, and the wall of Jerusalem. So we are situated in a deeply transitional period. The massive permanent building projects that are going to ultimately define his reign, they just haven't been completed yet.
That transitional phase actually explains verses 2 through 4, which clarify a really important religious detail. The text tells us that the people, and Solomon himself, were offering sacrifices at the high places, especially the great high place at a town called Gibeon. The Hebrew word for these high places is bamot. Now, if you know your Tanakh, you know that later in history, sacrificing at the bamot becomes a very negative thing. It becomes a sign of rebellion and idolatry. But here, the text explicitly excuses this. It tells us they sacrificed there specifically because there was no house built for the name of the Lord yet. We are completely assured of Solomon's deep devotion here. The text says he loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. The king went to Gibeon specifically because it was the greatest high place available, and there he offered 1,000 burnt offerings upon that altar. I mean, think about that scale. It was a massive, totally sincere expression of his devotion to God.
Section 2. Solomon's Dream at Gibeon. So after offering those 1,000 sacrifices, something completely unbelievable happens. During the night, in verse 5, Solomon goes to sleep, and the narrative abruptly shifts from the physical actions of a king to a profound, life-changing divine interaction. God appears to Solomon in a dream and makes an unprecedented offer. He is essentially handing this young king a blank check. The creator of the universe comes to him and simply says, "Ask what I shall give thee." Just pause and imagine the sheer magnitude of that moment. You're a newly established king. You are feeling the crushing, overwhelming weight of an entire nation on your shoulders, and God himself asks you what you want. It is the ultimate test of character, right? Because what a person asks for in a moment of absolute, unrestricted possibility, well, that reveals exactly what they truly value deep down in their heart.
And what is so incredibly fascinating in verses 6 through 9 is that Solomon doesn't ask for a single selfish thing. Instead, he just completely humbles himself. He recounts God's great kindness to his father David, and then he says something amazing. He admits, "I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties." This is the king of Israel speaking. He recognizes the immense responsibility of governing a great people that are too numerous to count. So his request is purely functional and deeply selfless. He asks for an understanding or discerning heart to judge the people and distinguish between right and wrong. He just wants the proper tools to be a good, just ruler for the vulnerable. He entirely passes on asking for wealth, fame, or the power to crush his enemies.
Well, as you can imagine, God is incredibly pleased by this priority. In verses 10 through 14, the text specifically points out what Solomon didn't ask for. He didn't ask for a long life, he didn't ask for riches, and he didn't ask for the lives of his enemies. Because his heart was entirely in the right place, seeking justice for his people, God grants him an unparalleled, wise, and understanding heart. God literally states that there has never been anyone like him, nor will there ever be. And then, God gives him the ultimate bonus. He throws in the riches and honor that Solomon purposefully left out of his request. Finally, God adds a specific condition for a long life, explaining that it requires walking in God's ways and keeping his statutes, exactly as his father David did.
Verse 15 then brings us right back to waking reality. Solomon wakes up and he realizes it was a dream.
But he knows this wasn't just some ordinary dream. It was a profound prophetic revelation. He is deeply moved. He immediately leaves Gibeon and travels back home to his capital in Jerusalem. And where does he go? He goes to stand before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, which is the most sacred object in all of Israel, representing God's very presence. There he offers more burnt offerings and peace offerings, and then he throws a massive feast for all his servants. This whole sequence just radiates a profound sense of gratitude. Solomon knows something foundational has just shifted in his life, his capability, and his entire kingship.
Section 3. The Dispute of the Two Mothers.
Talk about a sudden shift in tone. In verse 16, we move straight from this lofty divine promise of wisdom down to a gritty street-level crisis where that exact wisdom is desperately needed. Two women come before the king. The text notes they are harlots, meaning they are women on the very margins of society, vulnerable and likely without husbands or families to advocate for them. The first woman speaks and lays out a truly harrowing timeline. She explains they live in the exact same house. She gave birth, and on the third day, the other woman also gave birth. Then, a critical detail is established. There were 0 witnesses. They were entirely alone in the house. In the darkness of the night, the second woman accidentally lies on her baby, and the infant dies. At midnight, she takes the living son from the first woman's side and replaces him with the dead child. When the first woman wakes up in the morning to nurse her child, she finds it dead. But as she looks closely in the morning light, she realizes the horrifying truth. The dead baby is not the son she bore.
As you can imagine, the scene escalates into a complete and total stalemate. Both women are aggressively pointing fingers, making the exact same opposite claims before the king. The second woman interrupts the devastating story just to say, "Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son." And the first woman replies, "No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son." They are literally just contradicting each other in front of King Solomon. The king himself repeats the stalemate out loud, almost as if to emphasize the sheer impossibility of the case. One says the living is hers and the dead is the other's, and the second says the exact reverse. Think about it. How does a human judge solve this? There are no DNA tests, there is no physical evidence, there are absolutely no witnesses. It's just one desperate word against another. This is the perfect ultimate test for that divine wisdom Solomon literally just received.
Section 4. Solomon's famous judgment. So, with no witnesses to verify the truth, we hit the climax of the chapter. How is Solomon going to resolve the impossible? Out of nowhere, the king simply says, "Fetch me a sword." Imagine the pure tension in that royal court as guards bring a deadly weapon to resolve a baby custody dispute. Then he gives an unthinkable command. Divide the living child in 2 and give half to the one and half to the other. Now, on the surface, this sounds completely insane, right? It sounds brutal and tyrannical, but Solomon has absolutely no intention of harming that infant. He is deliberately creating a high-stress, life-or-death psychological trap to force the true nature of these two women out into the open. He understands a fundamental truth. Genuine maternal love cannot be faked or hidden when put under that kind of extreme, terrifying pressure.
And man, this brilliantly fleshes out the core of human nature. The contrast in their reactions is absolutely staggering. The true mother, whose son was alive, was instantly filled with compassion. The Hebrew text says her heart yearned for her son. She immediately cries out to the king, pleading with him to give the other woman the living child, begging him to in no wise slay it. She is willing to suffer the ultimate agonizing heartbreak of giving up her right to be a mother just to let the child live. In stark contrast, the second woman coldly says, "It shall be neither mine nor thine, divide it." It is pure spite, grief, and jealousy manifesting as absolute cruelty. Basically, if she can't have a child, no one can. With these raw, unfiltered reactions suddenly out in the open, the truth becomes undeniably obvious to every single person in the room. Solomon immediately delivers his verdict. Give the first woman the living child, for she is the true mother. The psychological trap worked flawlessly.
Verse 28 concludes the narrative by showing us the incredible ripple effect this had. The entire nation of Israel was left in absolute awe of Solomon's divine wisdom. The text says, "And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do justice." Now, the word feared here doesn't mean they were cowering in terror from a vicious tyrant. It means they had deep, profound reverence and respect for him. They realized that the young, inexperienced king who had just humbly called himself a little child was now fully equipped with a God-given capability to uphold undeniable truth and justice in the land. That blank check from the dream at Gibeon had been cashed, and the result was perfectly righteous governance.
Section 5. Explanations and key ideas. Let's dig into what this all means.
Let's step back and synthesize a few simple ideas strictly from the text, the Peshat. First, that Egyptian alliance. It secured peace. It's really important not to project later biblical prohibitions onto the very beginning of this chapter. Marrying Pharaoh's daughter is presented here matter-of-factly as a geopolitical move that stabilized his early reign. Second, the text goes out of its way to explicitly explain that the sacrifices at the high places, the Bamot at Gibeon, were totally acceptable because the permanent temple in Jerusalem just hadn't been built yet. It was an act of sincere devotion, not idolatry. Finally, the story of the two mothers teaches us something absolutely vital about the nature of biblical wisdom. Wisdom isn't just about memorizing facts or knowing a bunch of legal codes. It's about having the sharp, practical insight to understand human nature, to recognize hidden motives, and to navigate the complex depths of the human heart to establish the truth.
So we really must pause and ask, what exactly is this discerning heart that pleased God so much? The actual Hebrew phrase Solomon uses in the text is lev shomia, which literally translates to a listening heart. Lev is heart, and shomia is listening. This is such a profound concept. It is the rare ability to listen deeply, not just to the loud, angry words people are saying, like those two women screaming at each other, but to the quiet reality underneath those words. It's the capacity to hear the truth when it is heavily obscured by lies, trauma, and grief. It is the power to discern right from wrong in the messy, complex, gray areas of everyday life, and to govern with a moral clarity that actually protects the vulnerable. This is precisely why God was so pleased. Solomon wasn't asking for a bigger army. He was asking for the precise internal tool required to be a true servant to his people.
Section 6. Practical Life Lessons. How we apply this today.
The Tanakh is fundamentally a guide for living. So let's look at the immense value we can take away from this chapter for our own lives. First, true leadership requires profound humility. Solomon was the absolute monarch, yet he freely admitted he was like a child who didn't know how to govern. If we want to lead well in our families, our workplaces, or our communities, we literally have to start by genuinely acknowledging our own limitations. Second, we have to prioritize the right things. When we pray or set our life goals, are we asking for wealth, status, and the defeat of our rivals, or do we seek the wisdom and discernment to do what is morally right? Finally, look at the true mother. Her genuine love was entirely selfless. She was willing to endure the agony of giving up her child so the child could survive. Real love always sacrifices its own desires for the well-being of the other.
There is only one true path to justice, and Solomon showed us that it requires listening carefully and looking way beneath the surface of people's claims. When faced with an impossible conflict, true wisdom cuts through the noise. It exposes the spite of the liar and reveals the sacrificial love of the truthful. We must strive to cultivate that kind of listening heart, that lev shomea, in our own daily interactions. We need to look beyond superficial arguments to find the deeper truths in our relationships and in our communities.
To quickly recap the journey we just took, we've walked step by step through Solomon securing his reign with Egypt, his humble and monumental dream at Gibeon, and his unforgettable judgment that proved his God-given wisdom to all of Israel. We started with the political context and his sincere devotion at the high places. We then witnessed that profound dialogue where his humility was rewarded with unmatched wisdom, riches, and honor. Finally, we saw that exact wisdom perfectly applied in the harrowing case of the two mothers, leaving the entire nation in awe of the justice that now resided on the throne. It leaves us with a pretty powerful question to ask ourselves. In our own moments of impossible conflict, are we asking for the power to just win the argument, or are we asking for the listening heart to discover the truth?
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.